All right, so I'm going to talk about Impacto, which is essentially a wearable device that we created to emulate the notion of the sensation of impact in virtual reality. I'll just start out by showing what we've built. So this is Impacto that my colleague there, CJ, is wearing. And through that, he's able to contact with virtual reality. You can feel these punches from these virtual avatars. Right, so the talk is exactly about this notion, feeling a collision with a virtual entity in virtual reality. And from now on, I'm going to call that notion impact. So impact is kind of an open challenge in VR. Just look at the devices that are around and jumping in Kickstarter every day. They do not address that, but that is an important feature for virtual reality to become immersive because it's kind of an important notion of touching the virtual reality. And most of all, you might have seen some of my talks recently that talk about devices that interface directly to the body, and Impacto strangely kind of fits there in the middle. Not quite the far cutting edge things that I've done last time, but kind of in the middle, and that's because we felt that the first talk, which is muscle propelled force feedback, that kind of talks about how to display forces that are virtual in virtual games and virtual experiences, did not actually conceive everything that we wanted to conceive. So today I'm going to add a little bit onto that by talking about Impacto. What actually made things a little bit hard at the beginning is that in virtual reality, things are slightly different than when you're holding a mobile phone and feeling the forces. What happens that makes virtual reality so tricky is that anything that kind of happens in VR must also happen in your body. If not, immersion gets lost. And that moment is crucial. So in the moment that we have, such as this user here has a leap motion device, so he can see his hands waving in front, he has the immediate necessity to also touch that virtual reality. And that moment gets lost as virtual reality is kind of all at wireframes at this point. Luckily, a lot of people have been doing a lot of interesting work. A lot of it is at haptics and UIST as well. So one of them is this kind of generating the sensation of rumble. This is Israr and Ali's colleagues at Kai by actually adding these vibro tactile sensors in the back of the chair, and as you're driving, you kind of feel the car sliding and all this rumble. Another one from UIST last year, from Monia. This is a great device. It's a sleeve that kind of makes you feel like ants are crawling up your arm. Again, you're seeing ants, you're feeling the ants. So you're kind of immersed in that crawling experience. Very interestingly, the sensation of force feedback was actually used in a boxing simulation. This is using the spider. Spider is an installation, the kind of canonical force feedback installation with rods and pulleys that kind of push your hand and decelerates as you're kind of almost hitting the opponent, and that gives you a sensation of resisting the force of the opponent. That was done by Hasso. And also recently, the sensation of impact was actually addressed, and this is a wonderful work where they put vibration motors inside, and that informs your body by vibration where the contact point happens. The cool thing about these sensors is that you can kind of arrange them in a suit, and you see here somebody is actually playing a first-person game shooter and feels the impact of the bullets. So at this point, we kind of started wondering, does that mean that impact equals vibration? Or if you look one slide backwards, does that mean that impact equals the spider force feedback? And so what we kind of propose here, and I want to talk to you about today with Impacto, is that the answer is twofold. The sensation of impact can actually be decomposed into two subsystems. So one is at the moment of the collision, as you see there, I hope this thing works, there's a contact point, and that informs your body through the tactile sense. That's the location where the impact happened. And also extremely important is the impulse that got transferred into your body. This is raw force. Your limb is going to jerk back in response, and you can feel that. So what we're saying is we've got to address both things in different subsystems. So the first one, what you see there, is a little solenoid, right? Mechanical actuator retracts. There's a little tip that touches your skin. That causes pressure on your skin. You feel that through a tactile system. The second one is got to address the impulse. So let's do that with a different technology. So what we have here is electrical muscle stimulation. We're sending electrical impulses into our biceps that causes kind of involuntary muscle activation, and your muscles kind of recoil. And that, like that notion of your muscles going backwards, you don't have to look at it. You can feel it through your proprioceptive system. How do you put this together and you get this device here? Right? It kind of fits and at the same time pushes your muscles backwards. So that's essentially what the wearable device Impacto is, and it can kind of actually portray a very strong sensation. And the key for that strong punch feeling is actually the electrical muscle stimulation, because that is replacing what you've seen in the big spider installation. It's replacing all those motors and all those pulleys. It just happens to be that the motors and the pulleys are now your muscles and your tendons. And that is actually what allows us to select a fairly small solenoid compared to something even more massive that would stay over there and over there. And once we actually measured our solenoid, we kind of confirmed that it's about 200 grams or so, and that's in orders of magnitude below the force of a real punch. So if the users believe in that punch, it's kind of the EMS that is doing the trick, the electrical muscle stimulation. So let me walk you through some applications that we did to kind of understand what Impacto is interesting for. And we kind of did essentially 4 things. And the first one you've seen is to apply impact to arms feedback. So it was that boxing simulator I showed you at the beginning, in which once the avatar hits you, you feel the power of that punch. More interestingly, if you add one extra solenoid there to your fist, you can also feel the hits that you gave onto the virtual avatar. And here's actually CJ doing exactly that. So at that point, he feels that punch. And that's also when things get interesting. Alright, so we also thought, well, we don't have to canonically do what most people do in wearable devices. We just kind of limit to upper torso. We wanted to explore different regions of the body. So we tried on this football jumping simulator. Here you're basically juggling a football with your foot up and down, up and down. So here you see that the Impacto is attached to the foot and to the muscles of the foot, of the calf and the leg. In the virtual world, of course, he sees that actually football, and it hits exactly at the moment and pushes his leg backwards. All right, the next thing is obviously we wanted to combine these two and kind of create more meaningful and immersive experiences. For instance, by combining the latter two, you can actually get sort of a kickboxing application, which is pretty simple but a lot of fun to play with. So obviously you can kick back down, and you can kind of see that in the leg of the avatar. And the last one, this is a little bit different, but very interesting, I would say, is to actually activate passive physical objects that we have around us that can become interactive props. So what you're going to see here is sort of a baseball simulator, but we don't need like an actually actuated haptic device or a phantom or anything like that, because we're just using some prop that we find. It could be this prop that I hold here in my hand right now. So here's CJ now. We just attach the solenoid onto the prop, and the EMS stays on his muscles. The moment the ball contacts the prop in the virtual world, the solenoid hits, transfers vibration onto his arm so he can feel it, and his muscles go backwards in response of the source of the force, so the impulse is felt as well. Alright, and you can see here, it can be any prop. This is just a tool that I found in the workshop. I just attached a solenoid right there, and that now can stand in really easily for anything in the virtual world. It could be a baseball bat, it could be a ping pong paddle. It's just software changes at this point, right? And it could be a fencing sword. So let me walk you kind of through how we implemented Impacto. So what you see here are 2 Impacto bracelets, one there, and here you see the Unity where we're running the virtual boxing simulator. And in the moment there's a collision in that virtual boxing simulator, there's a Bluetooth message that we send to one of the bracelets, depending on which one it is. And you immediately see the solenoid jumping around in response. If you look kind of there at the oscilloscope, you also see the correct electrical muscle stimulation impulses that are actually going through their little tick marks. So that's essentially all there is to know about Impacto. The cool thing is that it's all no wires in the sense that there's no wires to the computer, it's all wireless, and it's all self-contained. So here's the bracelet, kind of if you open up and reveal the contents, and it's all very standard. A 3-volt microprocessor, it's an Arduino clone. There's a Bluetooth modem, so you can talk to it. There's a 2-channel electrical muscle stimulator. This is the same thing your doctor might use in rehabilitation. This is one that you can actually get as a doctor prescription in Germany. And we control that using relays and digital potentiometers, so we're not hacking the device itself, we're just sort of digitally controlling it. There's a lot of batteries in there. There's an accelerometer, and there's a solenoid, and of course the electrodes that glue onto your skin and transfer the muscle impulses. Now if we look over there, at the solenoid component, what is kind of neat about Impacto is that we can also use different tips if we want to convey different tactile messages. So here, for instance, a generic surface, just like a slap kind of thing, a smaller one, a bumpy surface, that's what we use for the knuckles, a rounded surface like a ball, or actually sharp surface like a fencing sword. User stop tracking is also off-the-shelf components, nothing surprising here. We use a Connect 1, because that gives us 26 arm joints, that's pretty accurate. And the virtual reality simulators are all running in Unity 3D. Now, we want to understand our main claim here, right? We're saying that we have on one side this decomposition of forces, and we're saying impact can actually be decomposed into tactile and into force feedback, or proprioceptive sense, if you will. So that's exactly what we put. Put people watching a VR video, so kind of immersive experience, this is what they saw, and after watching this video, they felt the condition, one of the conditions, I'll show you in a second, and they had to rate it 1 to 7, if it's real or not. This is the video, if it plays. There we go. All right, so after this, which you might encounter in different conditions, solenoid only, EMS only, or combinations of both. Now the coolest thing is also, we try different values of those. So, for instance, EMS here can be off, can be medium power, it can be high power. Same for solenoid. All right, and though this is full factorial design, 9 conditions overall. So if we look at this corner here, no surprises here. So this is like everything is off. People watched the video, they did not feel any haptic feedback, only the visuals, and so not surprisingly, they said this is not real at all. Now, if we look at this vertical lane there, which relates to solenoid-only conditions, you see that its also results are not that high, given that it's 1 to 7 Lopes scale. Now, that is probably caused by the fact that you feel something touching you, but in the video, you see arms flying backwards, and your arms do not fly backwards. Your proprioceptive sense is telling you something sort of wrong here, because I'm not really seeing what is happening. On the other side, the EMS kind of, at least, sort of confirms that crazy hypothesis, because you see that the ratings had shifted here. Something was not entirely correct for the people, because they didn't rate this as a scandalous perfect 7, but indeed it was sort of higher. That's probably because it starts to match what they see. Now, more interesting is the region where the combination is happening. And you see that for any combination, no matter if it's EMS low and solenoid low, if EMS high and solenoid high, or any of the other variations, the ratings are immediately higher. And that's probably because there was some increase in realism with increasing intensity as well. And you see that kind of beneficial to combine these two sensations, or these two subsystems, if you will. So also we started kind of wondering and backwards and thinking, well, how come this actually is working? Because there's some weird things happening here. Why didn't we use vibration, for instance? And one of the reasons for that is that what you see here when the solenoid hits is slightly different from if you put a vibrant tactile cell at that same point vibrating, because your body has different receptors for different things. And these two particular receptors here, the Merkel cells and the ruffini corpuscle, they are kind of tuned into pressure. And when the solenoid hits the skin, it's transmitting more pressure than vibration. So that's why this kind of works a little bit better. Secondly, one might think, and we did think that, well, the EMS is probably not helping because it's stimulating the biceps, and that's kind of artificial. It's a jerkiness that is induced. Well, it is stimulating the biceps, but at the same time, you resist with the triceps. This is this muscle here, and you're kind of resisting with the antagonist muscle. It's the opposing muscle. And that elicits a lot of proprioceptive feedback. And it's actually, since '98, one of the kind of models of how proprioceptive work, using both antagonist and agonist muscles working together. All right, so in conclusion, from a technical perspective, we just created this wearable device that delivers a sensation of impact by decomposing into two subsystems. It makes it easier and wearable. From a more mental perspective, this kind of fits into this class of bio devices that I talked to you at the beginning, which are a little bit different because they share the user's body as an input device or an output device, if you will. And that's kind of this notion here. And we think that this is a great moment to think or rethink the relation to interfaces and machines. And that's mainly because the moment we were at some years ago was kind of this one, mobile. You've got interfaces, but there's sort of distance to you. The devices have this gap between you. This gap would be the interface right there. The moment we move on to wearables, the gap became a very thin line because these devices started being in our body, attached to the body, right? So kind of more with us and doing more meaningful things. So our question, and I would like to leave the community with that question, is to think really what happens after that. What is this sort of post-wearable world? And maybe one of the things that might happen there is this notion of using the body, which Impacto does kind of at its core, as an input and output device. And so I wanted to just end by thanking Alex Hyman, Sijing, and Patrick Baudisch, who's my advisor at the HPI, And also tell you that we have an open position. Feel free to talk to me or to Patrick if you want to join the lab. And thank you so much for your attention. I'll be happy to take your questions.